Hey, how are you today? Matt Heisler here, and today we're going to talk about Waterfront. Now, this video is particularly targeted at people who are thinking about buying their first waterfront property. I've been out with a number of them, and in general, what I've found is that they sort of think all waterfront is really good, or it's all the same, or that it's very consistent. In fact, the quality of waterfront can vary greatly. And you want to make sure when you're trying to figure out what it's worth that you're comparing apples to apples. So today in this video, we're going to talk about the different metrics that I use in order to gauge what waterfront is and how expensive it's going to get. So with that in mind, if you really need extra detailed advice, make sure you reach out to me either in the comments or email me directly. And if you hang around to the end of the video, you will of course get my extra special offer for folks who do get to the end of the video and use me to rep them to buy their first waterfront property. So for those who don't know me, my name is Matt Heitzler. I am the broker owner of Vanderbilt Properties in Massachusetts, which is where all my waterfront experience is, but we have lots of different kinds here, so we'll talk about all of them. I have been selling real estate for over 23 years, and I'm not an attorney and I'm not a lender. Nothing in here is legal advice. First thing we want to talk about when we want to talk about waterfront is that bodies of water make a difference. And I know some of this is going to seem obvious, but if you click on a waterfront setting, you're going to find that a lot of agents will put anything in there that's waterfront. I mean, honestly, if there's a puddle big enough in the driveway, some of them will click that flag. And so you really need to check to see what's going on. Obviously, if it's next to a stream or a creek, as a general rule, that's not worth anything, right? Even if it's a pretty big stream, it's not usually worth very much. Now, if you get to a river, you start to see some things, change in terms of the pricing. Not much though. Again, rivers tend to be, not necessarily a huge deal in terms of valuation. Might be what you want. I'm just saying that you shouldn't have to pay a lot extra for it. The next level is a pond. And there are differences between ponds and lakes. Basically, size is really the primary determinant. And there are some pretty big ponds out there and they get pretty good premiums. But at the end of the day, ponds tend to be shallower. They tend to have a lot more issues with algae. Um, and generally, they're just not quite as boatable, right? But by the time you get to lakes, well, lakes are things that you can put boats on, right? And so that's really, to me, what a lake is. If I'm like, oh, well, I want to put a dock here and I could spend a whole afternoon out on the lake and probably not be in the same place for very long. Now you know that you've got, a lake. So the biggest lake in Massachusetts is Webster Lake, and it is definitely like that. So I would consider Webster Lake to be a major lake, but there are lots of other big lakes that you can buy waterfront on in Massachusetts. And then, of course, there is always ocean waterfront. As a general rule, ocean waterfront puts all of these to shame in terms of the prices that you're going to pay. So it's important to note that wetlands and marshes can be part of any of these. And, if there's a lot of wetlands or a lot of marsh between you and the body of water, it's going to impact, what the valuation is going to be. At the end of the day, even though people want to be next to water, they don't necessarily want to be next to a swamp. It's not what people are going to pay a lot extra for, and you definitely see that in the numbers. So, but when you're looking at the final level for each one of these things, what I've found is that there's a big difference when you start talking about usability, right? The lowest level of usability for waterfront is whether or not it's just viewable. There's nothing like a water view, and that's 100% true. But if that's all you're getting for usability, it's not really the same. So, if you have waterfront on a lake and all you can do is view it, you can't dock it, can't swim it, you know, you'll get a premium, but it might not be quite as big compared to other folks that are on the same lake that are able to do some of these other things. So dockable is really sort of the next level for me. There's probably a small difference as to whether or not you're allowed a permanent dock or just a temporary dock. But honestly, temporary docks are becoming so common today that I don't know that there's probably that much of a difference between a temporary dock and a permanent dock. So There is a difference. Just trust me when I tell you that. If you want to know what the difference is, let me know. But the temporary docks are usually more than acceptable to folks. And I mean, today you can really build fairly large structures with the temporary docks. They're designed for that kind of stuff. But the level after that is swimmable. Can you swim in it? And uh, there's a lot of waterfront, believe it or not, that's just it's got too much seaweed or algae or undergrowth where really nobody's going to swim there. So a lot of times to swim in it, it requires, depth. If it's only 2 feet deep, it's not swimmable, right? And so it might even be dockable at 2 feet, but just for a canoe, not really a boat, because 2 feet's a pretty small draft, right? So, and the last and most valuable is whether or not it's walkable. And I mean inside the water, right? So there's a lot of waterfront, believe it or not, especially around lakes and ponds, where you're probably not going to walk in there. You might go to the end of the dock and dive in, right? You'll do that, but you're not going to actually walk from the shore in. And that's because it's not sandy or it's very muddy or lots of other things. I mean, you can, right? But as a general rule, that's going to really impact everybody's usability of it. So, but if you've got waterfront and it's ocean waterfront and you can get right down there and walk onto the sand and dive right into the ocean, well, obviously that is going to be your best case. So as you can see here, there's really two kinds of metrics. There's the quality of the waterfront and then the usability itself. And so you get kind of a complicated matrix here in order to do valuations. And the big problem that most people run into is they compare things that are all waterfront. Like all of these things can be waterfront, but some of them are worth a lot more than others. By the time you get to oceanfront that's walkable, it's super, super expensive for very, very small houses because the land is so valuable and so rare. So that's really my guide for today. I hope if you have a piece of waterfront property that you're considering buying and you're not quite sure whether or not you think it's going to be worth what the other folks are asking, feel free to reach out to me in the video. We'll see what we can find out. Take care.